much for coming. Can you hear me enough? Okay, great. Well, I'm so happy and thrilled to be here. It's really weird though. I've never spoken to an audience that was like out like here. I've only spoken to audiences in circle. So this is different and a little scary. So, and I was telling a few of the people who came that I stayed up till 3 a.m. obsessing over my talk. And I'd written over 20 pages and I said, okay, it's never gonna be perfect, just go to sleep. And then I woke up today and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like have a few notes and I was driving here and I was like, what I really wanna do is work my talk around some songs. And then I came here and the musician had actually called in, not able to come. So I said, oh great, I'll be able to do that. I'll be able to work in some songs into my talk. So yeah, I'm really excited to do it that way because it's like I was saying to my friends in the back here that songs for me are singing and using my voice is at the same time it's like a security blanket and it's my wings. So it feels really like my natural way of sharing is not just talk. It's to use the voice and it's also just a big piece of who I am and what I want to bring to the world is encouraging people to listen to their own voices and listen to your own song that your soul is always singing to you because we are part of the earth and the earth is a vibration and everything here is a vibration. And that song is coming up through the ground, through us. And so we are these beautiful instruments of sound. And anyone who says that they can't sing is just judging themselves and comparing themselves to some pop singer that can do, like all these crazy stuff with their voice. And so that's part of why I'm here on the planet is to just remind us that song that's coming up through you, like maybe you wake up in the morning and you don't even realize that you have a song in your head. So maybe, just take a few moments and just be with your breath and be with the feeling that you had in your last dream and listen. And maybe there's a little melody in there, So I'm going to share some of my story about finding my voice and listening to that song that came up from the earth when I came to this river canyon. And this was 1993. Was when I got this inspiration to go to New Mexico. And it's a whole long story, and I'm going to try and shorten the story of how that inspiration happened. And basically, I went on this camping journey. I was living in San Francisco, and I was in this amazing communal household of a whole bunch of performance artists and musicians and healers, and it was a very magical time. But I realized at one point that I hadn't been out of the city for more than one full day in an entire year. And I said, oh my gosh, I've got to get out. I've got to get out for some days in a row. Like there's something in my soul that is dying, even though, I'm living this very social life and I have like all these friends and I had multiple lovers and, it was a very interesting time. So let me see, where is I going with that? So we did this camping journey with a whole bunch of my friends, and we were out on this place called the Lost Coast on the coast of California for an entire week, and it was just blissful. And we were hanging out with the seals on the beach, and we saw whales from the shore. We could see whales swimming out there, and we were singing and playing music and cooking together, and I was just more convinced than ever that these people were my tribe and that I had found my home, in this group of people, in this community. And then this really strange thing happened when it was time to go. Everybody just started packing up their cars. They were ready to go home. They were ready to go back to the city. And I was just struck with so much grief that it was time to go. I just didn't know what to do. And so I just went running down to the beach. The only thing I could think of to do was just like let that grief out of my body. So I ran down to the shoreline and I just threw myself into the sand and I just started weeping like a crazy woman. and for a really long time. And then I noticed all of a sudden that there were some friends that had gathered around me. And I could feel the energy that they were giving me, and it was sweet, it was comforting. But at the same time, I could tell that it was like, oh, poor, at that time I was Gretchen, my name was Gretchen back then. I'm on name number 3. This is part of the story. Yeah, another German name, another good German name. But I noticed that the energy that I was getting from them was kindness, but a little tiny bit of like patronizingness, like they were like a little sorry for me. And that just struck me so, it was so weird to have felt like so connected to these people, and that these were my people. And then all of a sudden I felt so separate and so like not completely understood. And I got home that night, and I lived in this attic room in this beautiful old Victorian house in San Francisco, which was, at the time, I only paid $200 a month rent, amazingly enough. And I lit a candle, and I lit some sage, and I was just, I knew that there was something in that moment, like my soul was speaking to me and was saying, go back to that moment and feel it. You need to feel it again, because I knew that there was something really deep and powerful for me. And I was like, and I asked the question, what was that grief about? Why were you so sad? And then I knew, I got it all at once. I knew that it was because we're all, but I was feeling in that moment that I was part of this wild place, this wild land, and that to leave it, I was leaving some essential piece of myself behind. And I felt like I was ripping apart at the seams. And then once I let in the pain of that and just the acknowledgement of what it was about, I said, okay, so what do I do? What do I do with that? And then these words just came floating in from nowhere. And it was New Mexico, desert, and caretaker. So I was like, okay, that's simple. I just need to find a place to caretake in New Mexico in the desert. And so I ended up telling, asking any kind of conversation that I would get into from that point on, I would end up finding a way to kind of twist it into talking about New Mexico or the desert or caretaking. And I'd be like, and you wouldn't happen to know of anybody, just thought I'd ask if you might know someone that needs a caretaker in New Mexico. I didn't find anybody in the city who knew. And finally, once I decided to go on this weird journey where I hopped a freight train up to the Oregon Country Fair, and the whole story with that, I ended up finding someone on that journey who actually did know a place that needed a caretaker in New Mexico. And this guy's name was Lone Wolf Circles, and he wrote down his name. This guy Joseph wrote down his name on a little slip of paper. And I went back off on my bicycle. I was riding my bicycle. Somebody had brought my bicycle for me to the country fair, and I was riding my bicycle back to San Francisco. And so, yeah, that's a whole story. That's a whole nother, I'm writing a book about this whole thing. And so I'm not gonna go into all the details of how that all lined up, that I ended up getting to New Mexico, but eventually I got there and to caretake for this guy, Lone Wolf Circles. And let's see. So the very first night that we get to the canyon, unfortunately I didn't walk in the first time. It's 7 river crossings that you have to go through to get to the place, and it's one river that you just cross 7 times. And the strangest thing happened on that journey in. I was hearing music in my head like I've never heard before. There were all these melodies just kind of layered all at once. It was like 100. Not that one. I don't know how to shut down this person's phone. What do I do then? That's okay. I think I did it. All right. Maybe that was one of the songs. I don't know. But it was crazy. I'd never heard anything like that. And I even woke up in the middle of the night and it was still with me, all these songs layered on top of each other. And then the next day I went down to the river and I heard just one melody, and this had never happened to me before, and it felt like what I was getting during that night of like hearing all the music. I don't know if I figured it out quite yet, but what I got later was that it felt like the land was like, oh, she's here, let's give her all the songs. And then when I went down to the river today, I just something came through my body, and I just started singing with this voice that I'd never known before. And I'm gonna tone it down a little bit. Can we turn down the mic slightly for a minute? Okay. Or I can just step away for a minute. Okay. So I started singing with this voice that was like something like this. I am gonna tone it down slightly, but it's and I've never done that before, so it was amazing to feel like, where did that come from? And to feel like it was the canyon that had allowed me to feel safe enough in myself, because I felt this sense of home. Like even when I was on the Greyhound bus on my way there, it was like I felt this place kind of pulling at my heart, like it was a magnet. It was a physical sense of like I was being tugged to this place. And once I got there, it was like, oh my gosh, this place feels like where I came from. Like somehow this place, this spot on the planet is like somehow the source of my soul. And I didn't know how, that didn't make any sense, but it was something that I felt. And when the songs came through and when I felt that voice come out, I was like, oh my God, this place like is waking me up to my full wildness, my full being. And I was just crying as I was singing. And then I walked up to the little cabin where the man that would become my husband, the man that owned the property, the 80-acre property that was an in-holding in the midst of millions of acres of national forest. He was crying too when I went up to the house, the little cabin. And I'm gonna break for a little song. And this is a song actually when I wrote these lyrics. I actually have no remembrance of what the actual melody was, but I looked at it this morning. I was like, oh, this will be a perfect like first song to sing besides the Canyon song. So I'm just gonna sing a melody that came to me this morning with this. There is a canyon where I still stand. There is a canyon, my holy land. There is a canyon that birthed my soul. There is a canyon where I learned to be whole. There is a river that leads to the sea. Follow the river and set yourself free. There is a canyon, there is land. There is a canyon where I learned to stand stand in my ecstasy, oh, stand in the sun, oh, oh, stand in my pain, and to know they are one, to know they are one. And to know that union of joy and ecstasy was a gift of this wildland, and that became clearer and clearer, more clear, the longer I spent there. Through the sweat lodge, I got to see that in some really incredibly vivid, very visceral ways. What did I want to say about that? Gosh, really some of my very most powerful experiences of my life have been not necessarily in the lodge, but in the river, actually, between rounds in the lodge, because the way that I felt called, even more, like my former husband instructed me in the way that he got from the land. It wasn't like a specific Native American kind of way of doing sweat lodge. It was something that he felt like the canyon was telling him. And then I had my own way of doing it that was a little bit different. And one of the things that I felt called to do was to spend as much time in the river between rounds as I did in the lodge. And something would happen because we did the sweats at dawn, we would stay up. The person who the sweat lodge was for, it would usually be like a one-on-one sweat lodge, like the person would come to the canyon for a vision quest, and either Wolf or I would be initiating them into the ways that it would go. And they would be instructed to stay up all night, entire night, if they could, and of course, there was a lot of like dozing off that would happen. And one of us, if it was a male, Wolf would tend to them. If it was a woman, I would tend to them. One of us would come down in the middle of the night, usually about 2 or 3 a.m., and walk up really quietly, in case they were sleeping. And then they would usually feel our presence at some point, and they'd be like, oh shit, if they were asleep. But sometimes they'd be awake. And let's see, where was I going with that? Gosh, I lost my train of thought about the sweat lodge. The river, yeah. So yeah, in the river, it was just amazing because we would do the sweats at dawn, and the river, even in the summertime, the river at dawn would be extremely cold. And sometimes we'd be doing sweats, that I had a woman come and do one New Year's Day one time. And so we were sweating at dawn on New Year's Day in New Mexico, the river was incredibly cold that day. And actually that was one of my very most powerful experiences of my entire life, because after I was done sweating, leading her sweat, she was complete. I did one more round on my own, and I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. And I went in the river and I just stayed in there. I don't know how long, it was probably maybe 5 minutes that I was in this freezing water, and I felt myself beginning to kind of merge with the entire universe, and it felt like a near-death experience. Like I felt like I could just go there, and it was the most blissful thing I'd ever experienced in my entire life. It was like my soul was just exploding out and becoming one with the universe completely, and I did not want to go back. It was so incredibly hard to like stop that experience and be like, okay, get in your body. You actually do want to keep living. You want to get out of this water, and you want to be see your 36th birthday. At the time I was about 35, and but it took me forever to get warm. I went up and built a fire, and anyway, so yeah, there was just so much that I got to take in about the medicine of the elements and the power of being willing to hold the cold and the hot and the painful and the blissful and the whole spectrum, of experience the things that we had to go through in order to keep our life going back down there were amazing. You know, sometimes the river would go up for months at a time, and we'd have to hike everything that we needed, like food and mail in and out. You know, we relied on a lot of mail for our livelihood at the time. So we would be hiking in and out with these big backpacks, and and for many years we didn't have any internet, so we would be bringing our laptops in and out of the canyon. And sometimes the river would be, you know, close to chest deep, and I'd have my laptop wrapped in multiple garbage bags, holding it over the head, jumping through the river, you know, so that I didn't get my laptop wet, you know, praying that I'm not gonna like trip on a rock and fall in the river and wreck. But you know, it was wrapped in plastic, so if that happened, it wouldn't have been a total catastrophe. But there was many challenges of living that way. You know, we harvested all of our rainwater. I did a lot of harvesting of wild foods. I spent so many hours processing our food for eating and hosting guests. We hosted a lot of guests for the Vision Quests and retreats and wild women's gatherings and all kinds of stuff. So just the fact of the river made everything more complicated and more challenging, but it was also, you know, this incredible blessing to live that way, far from all the noise, and that being able to live in that pure energy of wildness was just such an incredible gift. And I thought I would never leave. I was so attached to someday being the old woman of the canyon, and having all the stories of my whole lifetime to share with anyone who came to my kitchen, and feeding them and treating them like gods and goddesses, you know, the way that I love to treat people when they came and made the pilgrimage to see me and see us. But the nature of nature is change, and there's a lot more to this story that I'm not going to share today, but it did eventually become time for me to leave, and it was the most excruciating decision, and it took me years of knowing, and like my deep knowing, my soul knew that I had to leave for, I don't know, I would guess at least 8 years before I actually got the strength to leave, because it was the most difficult thing in the world to give up my commitment, my devotion to that place. How are we doing for time?
We've got about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. All right. So it did eventually become time to leave. And, but I knew that my mission after leaving the canyon was to bring the canyon in, you know, to keep it in my body, to keep that song in my soul, and to share it with the world in a way that I hadn't been able to there. And that was one piece of why it was time for me to leave, is that there was ways that the canyon, the safety and the constraints of that life and of the dynamics in my relationship there kept my voice hidden from the world and kept me too constrained, and that it was time for me to become one with my tribe outside of the canyon. And so I left, and I had nothing when I left but $200 in my pocket and a duffel bag with everything, what I could carry, and a bus ticket and a 10-day pass at a hostel in Ashland, Oregon. I wanted to stay in New Mexico, but my former husband said that was probably a bad idea to stay in New Mexico. And I said, okay, I'm going to listen to your wisdom like one more time, and then that's it. But he was right, because I knew that if I stayed in New Mexico, even though I do still feel like that is my soul home, that I was going to be feeling the pull of the canyon so deeply that it was going to make it harder for me to heal from, you know, it's like a breakup with a person, you know, it's sometimes you just can't see them or talk to them or be their friend even, you know, depending on the situation. So yeah, I didn't get to all the points about the medicine of the wild that I wanted to, but I hope that just hearing my story and hearing my songs has given you some piece of my personal medicine and the medicine of the wild that comes through me in this body and in this life. And I also want to mention, is it okay to share about an event coming up that I have an event coming up in a few weeks on February 26th at Wonder Valley Hot Springs. I'm doing an event for mothers and daughters, but also like it's really open to any women that want to come and maybe even just bring a friend or any loved one, or even if you really want to come on your own and just share stories about your mother wound or your mother relationship or your daughter or whatever. You're welcome to come. So this is the flyers. Sirens and Angels is the name of the event. And then I'm doing an open event on Earth Day with my friend Jenica. This is also, I'm co-facilitating with my friend Jenica. An Earth Day event that's open to all genders at Indian Cove. And it's going to be an overnight camp out with a workshop called Elements of a Feast. So we're going to be doing some feasting and preparing the feast together and story sharing and sharing the medicine of our hearts and souls together. And I just want to end with one little question for you all. And that is, what is the song of your soul? And how can you maybe more deeply listen for that song in your day-to-day life? And let's just spend just a few moments just being with that question. And if anyone has anything that's come to them or that anything that this sharing has inspired in you, I would love to hear any conversation or anything that stirs up in you. So thank you all so much for your beautiful attention.